All right, everybody, we are back for another episode here of your go-to Pacers podcast, Setting the Pace. We're going to be talking about the Indiana Pacers, a 121-117 loss, nail-biter of a game against the New York Knicks in game one of the semifinals. Definitely a tough one. No Facci here tonight because he was actually in attendance for this game, ladies and gentlemen. So he got to see a fun one, but not the result you wanted, and the curse lives on. But joining me to talk about this game and recap it, he was there for us after game one against the Bucks is Derek Schultz. Now, Derek, I hate to do this to you, put you on the spot here, but bringing you on after game one has not worked out so well for us both series, but much better effort this time against New York than versus Milwaukee.
Maybe you can look at it as the last time you had me on, game two was great, right? So
I
the,
like
the
that.
game
Yeah.
immediately following was a nice bounce back. Yeah. Look, Alex, and we kind of talked about this before. We're literally the game ended what 20 minutes ago,
Yeah.
maybe. So it's still very raw, and we're kind of living in the moment here. But I think there were, and we'll get to these in our conversation. There were a lot of really great positive things that the Pacers did tonight. The problem is that obviously in the playoffs it's about the results, right?
Mhm.
And to have it there in the grasp and really be in control for large swaths of that game, and then to see it just kind of slip through at the end is extremely frustrating. I'll also say that there's something special and invigorating about the Knicks and the Garden and the rivalry and some of those old feelings coming back, I think, for a lot of Pacers fans that made this game about as fun of a Pacers playoff game as probably the pinnacle of the Heat series,
Mhm.
I would say. And that was, 10 years ago that we're talking about. So it's going to be very difficult during this conversation, I think, to remain glass half full. But I do think that there are a lot of things that the Pacers can take from this game that are positive moving forward. And I think what Pacers fans were slamming the table, their fist down on the table for all this week, were the national narrative was, Knicks in five, and they're a plus 270 favorite or minus 270 favorite or whatever it is. And I think a lot of Pacers fans are looking at that being like, well, hold on here, guys. Like, yeah, sure, you can favor the Knicks if you want to, but acting like this is some foregone conclusion that the Knicks are going to win this series, I think people really were short selling the Pacers because they were looking at the defense, or they were looking at who they were before Siakam and all of that other stuff. And now I think maybe again, while I'm trying to stick to positives here, after game one, people are going to take the Pacers seriously because that was a take them seriously performance for about 46 and a half, 47 minutes.
And I think a lot of the reasons why people have been counting the Pacers out so much, one, they beat a Giannis-less Milwaukee Bucks team, so they didn't take them seriously in that series. Even though Chris Middleton, Dame Lillard are great players, they would still probably be a playoff team. Even if Giannis wasn't on that team for 82 games, they could have still made it as a top eight, top 10 team in the Eastern Conference, in my opinion. So selling them a little bit short, Milwaukee, that is, and they're not giving Indiana that credit. But if you look at Tyrese Haliburton's numbers since he's returned from injury, he's not the same guy that he was that led this team to the in-season tournament championship. And I think people look at his numbers and say, well, they're not that good. Well, tonight, the Pacers showed you how they can still be very impactful when Tyrese Haliburton is not that present in the game. And I understand that he did have 8 assists, but he was once again just 2 of 6 from the floor in this game tonight, only had 6 points. And that is not acceptable if you're trying to win on the road and you are the superstar leader of this team. It's not like you want to knock the guy, but he had so many bonehead decisions down the stretch where he got the ball stolen from him by OG Anunoby in the corner while he is sitting there just defending Pascal Siakam. He goes a little bit too early on that moving screen for Turner. I know Turner kind of moved there in a second, but I feel like he kind of rushed that move a little bit
Yeah.
too soon. And just some bonehead decisions by him. And I think that it put a lot of pressure on other people to step up and kind of be the scorer, the go-to person for that team. Andrew Nembhard had some nice buckets there, but then he takes a really questionable step back three with about a minute left when the game's tied. And then when you're down by 1 point, you have a bad turnover, but on the Turner foul, Nembhard fouls Brunson before the ball comes inbound, so he gets a free shot. So just some really dumb decisions and dumb plays, with the Turner foul. Nembhard, not a great shot, and the bad foul before Brunson got the ball, and then Haliburton just kind of being careless. Yes, there's a lot to be positive about, but I think if you just go straight to the end of the game, it's easy to blame officiating in a 4 point loss. And there was a lot of questionable calls. But the Pacers did this to themselves, Derek.
Yeah, look, I don't want to ignore the officiating. They missed the
No.
kickball, and that's a 5 point swing. That's a Pacers breakaway layup, right? So instead of being +2, they're -3 on that play. The Turner screen, by the letter of the law, is a foul. The timing of it, I mean, come on. I think that does a disservice to both teams and the fans that are watching at home, to be totally
It,
honest with you.
it
But
reminds me of the Yukon girls game, right? The Yukon girls game
yeah,
against
but you know what?
Iowa.
Even that was more blatant, right? I mean,
Yes.
on replay, you were like, okay, like I could kind of see like the upper body was where that foul, actually it was the lower body, if I remember
Yeah.
right, right? The legs, that's
Yep.
where that foul was. Whereas this one with Turner, I mean, yeah, he was technically moving, but man, it's a tough way to end the game. So I think you can say that while also saying that I'm not going to allow that to bail out Tyrese Haliburton. I'm just not.
Mm.
This is big boy basketball time. This is the Eastern Conference semifinals. He has his extension. He was the face of the franchise all this year. He was on the JW Marriott, for God's sake, this gigantic right building in the Indianapolis skyline for a couple of weeks back in February. 2 of 6, 6 points. Every single Pacer tonight, from even Aaron Neesmith all the way down, Isaiah Jackson, everyone had Ben Shepherd, everyone had a stretch tonight where you're like, hey, all right. Like they're playing pretty well. They're contributing, except for Haliburton. Like he was the only one. I think he was the only Pacer tonight, Alex, that really overall was a net negative, especially when you take into consideration the final couple of minutes, and that just can't happen. He was able to kind of hide offensively a bit. I get that he hit the game winner in game 3, right? But in the Milwaukee series, 15, 16 points. Okay. You can live with that in a series like that against an old Milwaukee team that is down some of their own scoring punch. They're not going to beat the Knicks like that.
No.
And when their guy and their dog, I don't even know what did Brunson end up with? 30, 41,
43 points.
43. Okay. When their guy is, it wasn't a math major at IU, but 37 points better than your guy, that's a big problem. And
Yeah.
I understand that they're different players, and the Knicks ask Brunson to do different things than what Haliburton does. But at the end of the day, I think NBA playoff basketball comes down to your stars.
Yep.
And the Knicks star was here tonight, like he always is, seemingly, and the Pacers star was down here. Now, long series, every game is its own entity. And just like we weren't overreacting to game 1 after the Bucks series in game 1, I'm not gonna do that here. But the fact remains is that, Tyrese Haliburton is going to have to be better because they can't win this series. It almost doesn't matter what everybody else does if he's going to play that poorly.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Pacers 9-man rotation that played tonight, Tyrese Haliburton had the fewest amount of points scored and the fewest amount of field goal attempts made. That's a problem
Yeah.
when he's supposed to be your best player. And then if you look at the Knicks box score, 25 from DiVincenzo, 24 from Josh Hart, and obviously Brunson had 43. That's your top 3 scorers in the game. Miles Turner was 4th with 23 points. So it's when they had their big 3 come up and lead their team in scoring and lead the entire game in scoring, and you're getting 23 from Turner, 19 from Siakam, 18 from McConnell off the bench. Those are good numbers, but that's not good enough. You
Yeah.
need someone else to step up and kind of be up there right there scoring wise with those big 3 from New York. And Jalen Brunson's going to do what Jalen Brunson does. He's a very tough guard. He was 14 of 14 from the free throw line, very crafty at creating the fouls and getting to his spots whenever he wants. The one time Indiana does double team, they leave DiVincenzo wide open for 3. The last guy you want to leave open for 3. So it's just little things like that are so like marginal and it matters so much, right? And that's why it's frustrating. But when I go back to the officiating, let's go back to the third quarter. Miles Turner catches the ball, turns around in the post. Jalen Brunson jumps into him and then hits the ball. And they call that a clean block. They originally called it a foul, which clearly looked like one. And then they go back and review it and say marginal contact after the block. Give the Knicks the ball somehow and just erase away 2 points right there, which would have been a huge difference when you're down by 1 with, whatever it was, 20 seconds left to go in a game. That to me was just a ridiculous call on an overturn. And even people that aren't fans of Indiana or New York watching this game were blown away on social media by that call, that it really just felt like there was so many little things like that that just absolutely felt like the refs fixed the game. I know they didn't, but it felt like that if you're on the losing end.
Yeah. And I get it. We have replay to correct obvious errors. That's what I always feel like the spirit of replay has been. And it just didn't seem to me that that was some sort of obvious. In fact, by if we're doing letter of the law, if the Miles Turner screen is a letter of the law foul, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the Brunson play is a letter of the law foul,
Yep.
right? I mean,
Yep.
that's kind of where I am with it. And look, I think my word holds even more. I mean, I'll even show you like this is on my desk, okay? And I'm telling you that I had a problem with the officiating tonight. No, but yeah, it was just inconsistent and down the stretch, and then the Nemhard play that the Knicks had to burn a challenge on, like that was clearly
Off
I
Nemhard.
thought Knicks ball too, and that call didn't end up mattering, and the Knicks were able to challenge in the whole deal. But um, best in the world, right? JMV always kind of uses that term, and sometimes they come up small too. I can almost give them a little bit of a break for the kick because in lifetime, to me, it really did look like one. And
Mm-hmm.
the fact that Neesmith had his hand down there was weird. But yeah, I mean, they missed that call. He did. Nobody kicked it, right? And the fact that you can't challenge that,
That's the
like,
problem right there.
what? That
What
doesn't even make any sense to me. Um,
what's
I
challengeable and
don't
what's
get why you
not
draw
is
the line
so
there.
frustrating to me. Like what's challengeable and what's not doesn't make any sense
Yeah,
to me.
I don't get it. So I don't want to be an ostrich and stick my head in the sand and act like, well, you got to overcome the bad officiating. No, the officiating is bad, and we have to hold officials accountable. So we have to criticize them on shows like this and do that and all of that. They deserve the criticism that they get. But I am trying to focus on the Pacers controlling the things that they can control. And one thing they can control is Haliburton being a lot better than he was tonight. And that's, I think, the biggest thing for them moving forward. I don't think it's a secret, and you saw it tonight what Rick Carlisle did. It's not a secret what the Pacers are going to try to do this series, right? They're going to try to take the depth to their advantage and run the Knicks up and down and do all that, even though, I was kind of giggling at Josh Hart is out of breath, guys. And I'm like, guys, you watched the Phillies series. It was this every single night. I mean, he's like impervious to getting gassed. And so are the rest of the Knicks, apparently. But that's what the Pacers want to do. And I think they're going to have success doing that. And I think there were a lot of things, some people will scoff at the McConnell thing or the top in minutes and be like, well, that's not sustainable. Well, yeah, maybe 18, 20 points isn't sustainable every single night, but I think those guys can contribute meaningful minutes every night against this team. And if the Pacers follow that formula, I really think 9 times out of 10, they win a game like tonight. I think it was a combination, like you said, of there was some bad officiating. I think we have to hold that accountable, but the Pacers down the stretch didn't cloak themselves in glory with their decision making either.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm going back to a Siakam forced shot down low in the post against Anunoby. I think he like totally missed everything. I wish they would have gone to that a little bit more though, because I felt like he was getting pretty good looks against OG Anunoby. Siakam was down in the post.
Yeah.
Kind of felt like they were very like random with going to that action. But you had some great plays in this game. Like I love the Aaron Nesmith dunk uh over Mitchell
Yeah.
Robinson. Like just a game changer. Like you go back to the end of the half when Tyrese hits a three to make it a 9 point game, and then Isaiah Hartenstein hits a three to close the half out to make it a 6 point lead instead of a 9 point lead. Like that's a big game changer too, like a
Yep.
momentum shifter. Turner hits a big three at the end of the third quarter to make it a 5 point lead for Indiana compared to a two. And, Obi Toppin does an in between the legs dunk in transition, gives the Pacers, I think it was a 7 point lead. And then Dante DiVincenzo goes on a 5-0 run himself. And it's one of those things where it's like he was celebrating that dunk a little bit too much, and it allowed the Knicks to get back down there and score quickly. So Josh Hart getting an offensive rebound off of a free throw that he missed. I
Mm-hmm.
did have someone send me a screenshot of the ball in the air, and Josh Hart completely passed the line going to get the ball, which the shooter is
I
not
did see
allowed
that.
to go get the ball until
Yeah.
it hits the rim. So
I
that is
did see that.
another thing that was
Letter of
missed.
the law, right, Alex?
Right? Letter of
Letter
the
of the
law.
law.
And if you're going to call things, someone said, do they not call lane violations anymore? I'm like, well, they
Yeah.
don't really ever call lane violations. I mean, it's very seldom that you see a lane violation called in an NBA game, let alone a playoff game. But like little things like that matter. And I felt like there was one where Josh Hart got an actual offensive rebound where the ball swung around. And when the shot went up, Turner didn't even look to make contact with Josh Hart. He just turned his back to go get the rebound. And that's not really on Turner necessarily, but that's just a scouting thing for me. Like, anytime you're around Josh Hart, you have to know where he's at when it
Yeah.
comes to being on the defensive rebounding side of the ball. And you have to make contact with him because he has got a nose for the basketball. And I felt like I felt really like Josh Hart to me was more of the difference maker in this game than DiVincenzo, even though he had some big points. I just felt like Josh Hart made so many key plays, and like the way he's able to get the ball off the glass and just sprint down for a fast break point, like it really put Indiana on their heels defensively, and they really struggled. So I know I threw a lot at you there, but just throwing some things out, just saying like, yeah, there was some good stuff, but man, there's some really some things that they could work on
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. But there are, they've got players too. I put
Yeah,
that in that kind of, the Knicks are good.
yeah, very
It's a
good.
good basketball team. And so Hart doing what he did, I think his offensive rebound and his nose for the basketball, it's almost worth more than the points that the Knicks score. There's just something about like, you're down 7 and suddenly Josh Hart out rebounds 3 guys and taps the ball back out and DiVincenzo hits a 3 and suddenly it's a 4-point game. Like that 3 is almost worth 6,
Mm-hmm.
because you're in danger of going down 10 on the next possession and instead it's a 4-point game. And I feel like they're so disheartening. You saw that in the Phillies series where you just kind of saw the Sixers like deflate when the Knicks would get those second chance points. And I thought the Pacers did a great job. The first half, they really kind of kept them off the glass and controlled things on that end. And then, you started to see some leaks in the boat. I think later, and you started to see some just leaks defensively too. In the second half of that game, I think the Pacers, clearly played a better first half than they did a second. But Hart and DiVincenzo hitting shots, I mean, those things are to be expected, but the Pacers have to be that much more dialed in on their end. And I think most of their guys were dialed in tonight. And honestly, Siakam had a couple of stretches where he was pretty, overall, I thought Siakam was just okay. I mean, that was
Yeah.
kind of a disappointing game for him, or just kind of a meh game
Mm-hmm.
for him. And when Haliburton is bad and then your second best player is just kind of like, yeah, he was all right. That it's really tough to win on the road like that.
Especially when you only lose by 4, that does give you a little bit of
Yeah.
encouragement for maybe
Well,
they'll
yeah,
bounce
too. You could
back.
flip that glass half full. Sure.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I was kind of wondering, I saw this on Twitter as well, so I'm kind of curious your thoughts. I know that the Pacers bench built that 9-point lead early on in the fourth quarter. They started to lose it a little bit, and the Pacers went back to their starters. At some point, do you think they should have maybe gone back to McConnell with some of that starting group because of how well he was playing in this game? Because he was able to get to certain spots on the floor, making shots. Like clearly, he was outplaying Tyrese Haliburton this entire game. And I'm not saying you have him out there over Haliburton because that's not something you're going to ever see happen. But like
Yeah.
tough moment right there. Like he played better than Haliburton in this game. What would have changed if they would have had him out there instead of Haliburton? Maybe something better happens for Indiana. He's a better defender, and he had played better offensively in this game. I mean, I'm not saying that's what I would do, but it's a good question. Like he outplayed Haliburton in this game tonight.
Yeah, it's tough. Kind of a rock and a hard place thing because you're right. It's one of those things that, final 2 minutes of a tie game, suddenly Rick throws in McConnell and Halliburton goes to the bench. Every single person that's watching that, however many millions of people that are watching that game notice something like that. And they say,
Yeah.
whoa, what's happening here? Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I do wonder if maybe, for all the flack that Carlisle got, including from me and I think from you and Facci at times about
Mm-hmm.
maybe riding those bench players too long in the Milwaukee series when things were going downhill. You do wonder if maybe he can get away with that a little bit more in this series, especially as they're trying to bring Haliburton along. But Alex, it's just I think we've noticed, not to make this podcast all about Haliburton, but I think we've noticed here over the past couple of, this is a big sample now where something just hasn't quite looked right with him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to really quantify, the back injury flaring up and then post injury himself. Physically, where's he at? Is he in pain? What's he playing through? What percentage is he at? I think there are some unanswered questions that we may never get the answers to here, but the bottom line is that if you're out there and you're starting and you're playing major minutes, you're expected to perform. And if that performance isn't up to snuff, then, you have to call those things into question. So the Pacers have a lot of different areas that they need to dial in, as I said. But I think the main one that is clear and obvious and that we have to keep talking about is the star player has to be better. And even if he was mediocre tonight, the Pacers probably win that game by 7 or 8 points.
Right.
And that's what's so disheartening about dropping game one.
And I think one of the things that really disappoints me is just seeing 0 personal fouls from him, which kind of
Yeah.
shows his level of aggression, right?
Yeah.
offensively and defensively, because there was a couple times in transition where he maybe could have fouled somebody to stop an easy basket, but he just lets him blow right by him. And defensively, like I thought he had gotten better against Milwaukee. I really did. You saw him trying a lot harder. And this game tonight, he showed little flashes of it, but it wasn't for the full 36 minutes that he played. It was maybe for 12 to 15. And I feel like he can just be better on that end because they had him starting out the game on Josh Hart. Well, obviously that didn't work out, so they got to put him on DiVincenzo. There's not really a good person to hide Tyrese Haliburton on in this series right here because of how the Knicks are built and how often they play their starters. So to me, it's like, hey, if they're gonna maybe take DiVincenzo out of the game for McBride for a little bit, or Brunson out of the game for McBride, maybe you try to match those minutes a little bit more so he can
Yeah.
guard someone a little bit different. Maybe I don't know exactly, but to me, that's one thing that was like a big concern of mine coming into this series was we know DiVincenzo can get hot. He scored 36 against Indiana earlier this year, and I think he had like another 30-point game against Indiana too. So it's like we know he can get hot, and he's hit some big shots in the last series against Philadelphia, even though he didn't have a great series, and that was one of the things they were worried about. I mean, for him to step up and have 24 points in this game, the two guys that Haliburton was primarily guarding had pretty good secondary games to their star and Brunson. So he's just got to be better. And I don't know how the Pacers can kind of change things up because to me, they've got to find a way to slow Brunson down a little bit. I'm fine if he scores 30 to 35, but you can't allow him to get 43
No.
points.
Yeah, I agree.
And I mean, Nimhard tried, Neesmith tried. I thought McConnell actually played pretty good defense on him in this
Me
game.
too.
And I kind of wonder maybe they go to that a little bit more, or if there's a way they can try to double team and see if that works. Because I felt like there was a few times when they actually did trap, double team, things like that. It gets the ball moving out of their hands. It might come back to him, but he has less time to kind of get his offense set up.
Yeah, and he's just so good at drawing fouls, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he shot fakes and getting guys on his back and things like that. It's he's just a tough player to play. But I agree with you. I think there's a difference between letting Brunson get his 30 and letting Brunson get his 40. If you kind of can clearly cut it off at some point, because it's really hard. It's going to be, what'd you say, 24 for DiVincenzo and then 43 for Brunson, and then
Yeah,
was it 23
25,
for Hart?
25 for Hart.
25 for Hart. Okay. Um, yeah, it's going to be hard to win like that,
Yeah.
even with all the good that the Pacers got throughout their box score, especially with the way that the bench played. It's going to be hard to win like that. I think ideally you want to keep Brunson around 30 and those other two to 20 or under. I think is kind of the path forward and the formula for the Pacers, but it does start with Haliburton because you're giving up a lot on the defensive end, and if you're going to give up a lot on the defensive end, then you need to make up for that on the other side. And lately, he's not been making up for those liabilities on the defensive side with the lack of scoring punch.
Yeah, and I will give him credit. Like he did have that nice steal there on Brunson when he did reach in to kind of trap there. They had to review that play because the officials called it a foul originally because they missed that call too, right? And then
Of course,
yes, and then the ball, he did a good job trapping Brunson. Brunson threw the ball off him, but it ricocheted off him and hit Brunson out of bounds. So like there were some good moments. It's just like not consistently enough where he's been impactful defensively. And that could really just be said for everybody across the board. Like this Pacers team, they're not a great defensive team. We know that. They're mediocre at best, but they're making strides. I think they've gotten better throughout the playoffs because it's really hard to win in the playoffs. It really is. And the way they were able to kind of hang in this game and still be there, I don't think a 121, 117 game is something that's going to favor New York throughout a 7-game series. I don't think that's the style they really want to play. So you were kind of able to play Pacers basketball for the majority of this game, but you didn't pull out a win, which is tough. But you also have to think, are DiVincenzo and Josh Hart going to be averaging around 24, 25 points a game in this series? I don't really know if I see that because in the previous series, it was Brunson and then Josh Hart was their second highest scorer with 16 points a game. So, if he's averaging 9 more points a game against the Pacers than what he averaged against Philadelphia, that's going to be problematic. I think that there's a lot to be, hopeful for in this series for Indiana. And I think the bench was great. We'll see how that plays out in game 2 because I think it's all just a matter of like every game is different. Every game is never the same in the playoffs. But I did like the card to play Isaiah Jackson in this series over Jalen Smith as the backup 5, and I really like the way that he played in this game for the majority of it. Um, I think that that's something they could maybe lean in a little bit more into, just because I like his activity on the glass, and I like his defensive presence. Like he's not afraid to block shots, and I think he made it a little bit more difficult for Brunson too to drive in there because he's just quicker off his feet than Turner is. Like that's not a knock on Turner, but he's just so much quicker getting off his feet and blocking shots than Miles is right now. Where Miles might have the timing down, I just think Jackson's got the speed and the athleticism that Turner doesn't.
Yeah, and he didn't look shook, for lack of a better term. It looked like he felt like he belonged. Like, when I saw him out there in the first quarter, I thought, okay, all right, here we
Yeah.
go. And the first, I want to say like the first two or three, I got to go back and watch again, but the first two or three possessions, you were like, oh boy, he
Yep.
missed a wide open layup. Yeah, I think he blew a defensive assignment, maybe. I'm trying to remember, but then really after that, ongoing, he had the goaltend, but it was almost like the point was he got the point across. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'll never fault his aggression. I want him to get out there and be active and be aggressive. But I'm looking now, 8 points on 6 shots and 5 rebounds. I thought he was terrific. And Ben Shepherd hitting 2 threes. You got 16. So, as much as we're talking about, well, the Knicks got this from DiVincenzo and from Brunson and from Hart, maybe the Knicks are looking at the box score and saying, well, they got 16 from Jackson and Shepherd combined. They got 30 from McConnell and Toppin. So, maybe that's not sustainable either. So who knows? But I do think deep down, the Knicks probably have to know that they were fortunate to win this game.
Yeah.
That's the Pacers had it. they were in control. And every time the Knicks kind of made a surge to cut it to 2 or to 3, it kind of ballooned back to 6, 7, or 8 points until the very end. The swing that was unrecoverable was the kickball into the Dante DiVincenzo 3, and that's really what ultimately led to the final difference.
Yeah, just defensively in the fourth quarter, Indiana just fell apart. And
Yeah, I agree.
allowing 39 points in the fourth quarter, you're not going to win a lot of games like that. The Pacers' goal is to try to keep teams around 30 points and under. They held New York to 27 in the first, 22 in the second, 33 in the third, which felt pretty good. They pretty much traded points there, 33, 32 in that scoring, but getting outscored by 9 in the fourth quarter was just massive. And a lot of that was a heavy amount of Brunson kind of coming to life there in the fourth. I actually had someone text me and say, "Man, the Pacers are making Brunson look tired. He's not looking for a shot as much." I think Brunson was saving himself for the fourth quarter, especially in that third quarter. He was kind of trying to get other guys involved, but he really came to life in that fourth quarter. Was getting to his spots. He only had 1 3 in the game too, so I think that it just kind of shows you like how difficult of a matchup he is for anybody in the league to guard. Like he's been playing at an All NBA level, first team level to me the last couple of months, really. And I mean, you have to just give him a lot of credit, but like you said, Siakam and Haliburton don't play great games. Siakam played an okay game, an average game.
Yeah,
Haliburton played a below average game. I thought Turner had some nice moments in this game as well. 23 points, that's pretty good scoring for Turner. You're going to take that. I thought New York, one thing they did differently, though, was they were, I think, like last in switching on pick and rolls and pick and pops, and they switched everything in this game. When Halliburton gets that switch with Hartenstein, he's got to make him pay. It felt like too many times he would get Hartenstein switched onto him, and he would just try to like dribble back out, see if he get it open three, but never really attack off the dribble. And I want to see that aggression from Halliburton step up to where he's taking bigs off the drive. And even if other players step up for New York to try to cut that off, at least that's going to lead to wide open guys for shots. He's not really putting any pressure at the rim because I haven't really seen Halliburton get in the paint too much. It feels like, especially in this game, it felt like he was just hanging around the perimeter too much. Want to see him get into the paint and be more aggressive with his driving. And even if he's just driving a kick, at least it gives the team a different look. I mean, Halliburton's still a really good player, but he's clearly not the same player that he was before the injury. And it's obvious to see, but he's got to be better. I know we keep going back to that, but little things like that with the Hartenstein switch and stuff like that, you got to take advantage of that.
Yeah, like there's a difference between, and I don't know if this makes sense, but I'm going to try anyway. There's a difference between passing and being passive. I understand that he wants to facilitate, and that's fine. And so, driving kick, great. Like I want him to do those things, but it almost felt like it crossed the line into being passive and being, I almost wish the Turner screen didn't happen just because I was honestly fascinated to see Halliburton with the ball in his hands, trailing by 1 with 11 seconds left, and what he was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because you go back from those Milwaukee or the Boston games, or really any of the in-season tournament games, the Atlanta games. And when he had the ball in his hands in those big spots, you were 150% confident that he was going to make the play, right? And that game, he was so shaky that I don't know what was going to happen. Maybe a turnover was coming, or maybe it was like the Milwaukee game 3 where he was kind of had a nondescript game, and then suddenly, boom, there's the game winner, and that's the highlight that everybody ends up playing. So,
Mhm.
I agree. I mean, if we're giving like our summation or our thesis statement of game 1, it's that Hallie needs to be better.
Yeah.
Right? There are all these other things that happened tonight that some are good, some are bad, some are sustainable, some are not sustainable on both sides. But the bottom line is that the Pacers can't win this series if Haliburton is going to be like a 13-point per game score. They're just not. They're
Yeah.
not going to win the series like that. They need to get more out of their star.
It'll be interesting to see what the national perspective is on this game. You're probably going to see a lot of people praising New York for what they did, Josh Hart, Brunson, rightfully so. But on the flip side, are they going to look at what the Pacers bench did and how they outscored the Knicks, or are they going to talk about Halliburton's game and how he was so ineffective and really just not there? And Halliburton's going to have that scope on him now, where whenever he doesn't have a big game, people are going to call him out. And I was actually talking to a friend today, and I said, you know what? The best thing that can come from this, if the Pacers do get beaten 5 or whatever it is early, if Halliburton doesn't play at a high level, he's going to get ripped all offseason for, just his performance if he doesn't play well. And I said, I think Tyrese is one of those guys that responds really well to criticism, and he wants to prove people wrong. So I think that would give him extra motivation to be better. I think that he's going to have motivation to be better after this game too. For game 2, I thought that's kind of what we saw a little bit in the Bucks series. Like almost like game 1 was a feel it out game. Game 2, he played better, but still wasn't great. And then game 3, he had the game winner triple double. Game 4, I thought he played a pretty good game. So like he's shown like over the series against Milwaukee, like he can get better in a game and find ways to attack. He's a very smart player. But I do think that as he gets more and more national criticism, he's very active on social media, sees everything. He's gonna get a lot of stuff where people are ripping him for his performance. I think he's gonna bounce back well from that and take it personal because that's what he's done previously. I could be proven wrong, and New York's defense could really just shut him down. But I think that this is going to be good for him in terms of like long-term growth, whether or not he responds to the series or not. But I just think that the criticism from the national media, national perspective, is going to be a wake-up call for him a little bit.
Yeah, big boy time, right? Big boy
Yep.
time. You got the big boy deal. It's this is what everybody goes through. Paul George was dunking on Birdman and everybody was eating it up. And then suddenly, the secret's out about Paul George. And we're having these same conversations 10 years ago about Paul George and is it good enough and all of that. So this kind of comes with the territory. And obviously, LeBron, Steph, and that next tier of NBA player comes, it's what they live every day. I do hope and think, and I'm still hugely optimistic about who Tyrese Haliburton is going to be as an NBA player. And I still think he can be the things that we talked about him being. I just wonder if, we keep waiting for him to hit that 5th gear again this year. And I don't know if he can shift the car that way now. I don't know. I would love to see it. And we kind of keep waiting for him to shift into that gear. But yeah, maybe this is just something that they're going to have to, obviously he's going to have to be much better than tonight, but, the high 30s points or something like that, or hitting a bunch of step back 25 footers. And, maybe that's not going to be consistently in his bag for the rest of this year until he has a full off season to get healthy and get his body right. If that is what is indeed holding him back. But I still think the Pacers can win this series if Tyrese Haliburton is just good. If he's, it doesn't
Average.
have to be all NBA first team MVP sort of on the periphery conversation, Tyrese Haliburton. But if he can just be good, if he was good tonight, Alex, they win by a dozen points, 15
Right.
points probably. So that's all that it requires for this to kind of move forward and for the Pacers to advance. And that's what's so frustrating is that just like tonight, it's right there. It's there for the taking. Like this series is there for the take. I fully believe they can win this series. It's
Yeah.
just you got to go out and do it.
Yeah, and that's what I said when I did the preview podcast. I said, you know what? I think the Pacers can win this series. I don't think they will, though. I said I think New York wins this in 7. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think. I think that New York has, a good starting 5 with maybe one bench player that they really trust. But I think that because of their lack lack of depth and really not a lot of great scoring outside of Brunson, they're a beatable team. I don't look at this team and think, oh my God, we can't beat them or nobody can beat them. They're beatable. They beat Philly in a 6 games or in 6 games by outscoring them by 1 point over that 6 game stretch. So, it's a game of inches, right? And I think that New York, they know how to win. They've won a lot of close games this year. They've got that superstar. And that was one of the questions I asked the guy that covers for the Knicks, name's Alex. Then I said, do you think it's easier to prepare defensively for a team that, has a star like Brunson? Is it easier to prepare for a team like that and instead of a team like Indiana where you don't never know who's going to show up on any given night? You just kind of have to guess, well, I know they can do this, this, and that, but you never know who's going to be the guy for Indiana because they don't have like just a one go-to score type thing. And he said, I think anytime you have a superstar on your team, it's much harder to defend that team because they're going to be able to do what they want. Where you can live with random streaks of guys having, stretches and quarters and things like that. And just, they're not going to always be able to kill you every single game. So I agree with what he was saying, but I was hoping that Indiana will be able to find a way like, okay, Brunson, even if he scores 43 points, you stop Josh Hart and DiVincenzo from getting 24, 25 and hold them under 20 around like 17, 18. Then again, Indiana probably wins that game by 7 or 8 points.
Yeah, and I think I think there's something to if the overlying point in playoff basketball is for 45 minutes, I think like the whole like team concept and sharing the ball and all of that, I think that can go. But there are just these games like tonight that happen a lot in these series where it's a 3-point game either way with 3 minutes left. And that's when you really kind of, the Knicks, it's no secret, right? They're going to lean into Brunson and the Pacers need to have somebody that they can lean into. You can rely on Ben Shepherd to make shots in the second quarter, but final 3 minutes of the game, right? It comes down to your stars. And they just weren't good enough tonight, and again, I don't want to give Siakam a pass fully either because I thought he was just okay. And I think they need him to be better than okay. But it just stinks in a game where, as I said at the very beginning, it felt like every single Pacer, even Neesmith, who didn't have a great game tonight either, had a stretch where you were like, all right, where they looked pretty good and they contributed something. Haliburton was really the lone exception, and that should never happen to your star.
Yeah. I mean, you're right about Siakam. I thought that they should have done a better job of getting him the ball too in
Yeah.
spots where he can perform. Like, I think he was feeling it in that low post mid range against OG. Like, those two, they know each other pretty well. I mean, OG's going to get stops here and there against him. Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, it's going to happen. But there was times where he really couldn't stop him. And I was like, just get it, keep going back to him. Like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, that's one thing that you appreciate about the Knicks. They know exactly who they are, and they go back to it every single time. You've got Tibbs yelling for isolation every time Brunson has the ball, and Indiana could do nothing about it. Well, make New York change what they're doing defensively if they can't stop Siakam in the post. Just keep giving him the ball, and he might get might get OG in foul trouble. Now, the foul shooting has been terrible from Siakam in the playoffs. I think he's now 14 of 30, if I'm not mistaken, throughout the
Bad?
playoffs this
Wow.
year.
I knew it was bad. I didn't know it was
Yeah.
that bad.
He
Wow.
was 12 of 28 after he missed the first two, and then he ended
Yeah.
up hitting the next two. So 14 of 30 is what I think it is. So he's not been shooting the ball well from the free throw line. Turner left one short on the free throw line as well. Neesmith hit some big free throws, but Indiana gets outscored by 7 from the free throw line, and the Knicks made one more three. That's a 10-point difference right there. So little things like that, I just think can make a big difference. But one thing we talk about Indiana's random offense, right? And how they just play random and whatever's open they take. I don't always like that. It's fine at times, but it's like when McConnell's in the game, you kind of know what you're going to get. McConnell's kind of dictate the offense, and he might spray it out to somebody for three, where Topper might be open or Shepard might be open, but it's mostly like he's going to try to attack in the paint and kick it out or score over somebody. When it comes to the starting five, it's like they might run the pick and pop with Tyrese and Miles for a couple sets, and then the next play they're going Nimhard taking his guy off the dribble, and then you might get a Siakam post up. I'm fine with randomness, but if you find something that's working, to me, I would just keep going back to the well and just keep going to it until they change it. Make them adjust, make them do something different before you start just changing everything you're doing.
Yeah. And I think that they can, honestly follow a lot of the same blueprint as tonight and win game two.
Yeah.
and win this series that way, because and lean into their depth and lean into some of the areas where, and if they don't get killed on the glass, and if they're average defensively against the Knicks top three, I really do think that they can win this series. Like it's not too big of an ask, I
Right.
don't think, but it does need to include Haliburton playing better and Siakam consistently being better, and this is supposed to be the 1-2 punch, and this is the time of year when you need those guys to step up and perform. So, that has to be part of the formula, I think, for the Pacers to win four out of the next six now.
Yeah, McConnell and Turner can't be your leading scorers every game to
No,
win the series. You have to have your star step up, and that's what, like you said, big boy basketball is all about. It's about your star stepping up and really embracing the spotlight. I mean, I'm sure there's games Reggie Miller did not shoot the ball well, but at least he was taking the shots, right? And I think that's what's frustrating is just the lack of shot attempts from Tyrese. Just six
yeah,
attempts throughout the whole game, and he wasn't actively looking for a shot. And I think whenever he kind of misses a few or doesn't feel like he's in the flow offensively, he won't take them. But I think he's got to be better and more aggressive in taking those shots.
I have to kind of jog my memory here, but I believe Game 6 of the '99 series, which I know Pacers fans probably don't like talking about, Reggie was 3 of 18. So probably his worst
Yeah.
game, as you know how good he was and how clutch he was in the postseason. Probably his worst playoff game, pound for pound, and even then, 18 shots. And look, I get it. They want Haliburton to facilitate and all of that too, but 6 shots ain't enough. 6 points ain't enough. Like that's just not gonna do it. Not on this stage. January against Charlotte, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Against a Bucks team without a lot of their offensive fire, yeah, absolutely. That maybe you can get by with that, but not in this series.
No, not at all. So I think we've used Tyrese Haliburton as a punching bag enough this episode, right? I think we've got all of our licks in. But anything else you want to discuss before we wrap this up?
Yeah. We said this the last time that I was on the show. Every game, the beauty and I guess the blessing and the curse, depending on if you're coming off a win or coming off a loss. Every game in an NBA series to me is its own entity. And you saw game one, Milwaukee series, game one and game two, drastically different, right? Game four and game five, drastically different. Game five and game six, drastically different. And I think you can see the same thing play out as far as this Knicks series. If I'm being honest, I really this was about as much as I enjoyed a Pacers basketball game, at least for 45, 46 minutes, as I have in a decade.
Mm.
It was great drama. It was great theater. I'm so thrilled that the Pacers are back on this stage again and playing meaningful basketball like this late and on that stage in the Garden. The Knicks as a franchise are grossly overrated. Right? They really haven't accomplished a whole lot in their history, but I think the Garden is like the place to be to have this kind of stage. And I'm excited for what they can do this series, and I'm optimistic about a lot of the things that they had tonight. I just hope that we're not having this conversation in a couple of weeks. If the Pacers do, if your prediction lays out, Alex, and the Pacers lose this series in 7, I think we're going to point back to this game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was right there for the taking, and game one and game 5 are the two, I think, big swing games usually in the series, where you want to kind of, set the groundwork or swing it back your way. And obvious to say, Captain Obvious, but a huge missed opportunity tonight in the game that they largely controlled.
You're right about that, and that's what stunk because he felt like they were in control of this game for the majority of it, and it's like the Knicks were the ones that were trying to chip away at the lead,
Yeah.
and when they finally got the lead, it just felt like okay, that are the Pacers ever going to get this back? When DiVincenzo hit that three, that's when I kind of felt like okay, this game's over, and I'm sure other fans felt that way too, but just like you said, the missed kickball that they said, and then kicking it out, spraying it out to him. They finally double team Brunson, and then he sprays it out to DiVincenzo for a wide open three, kicks it into makes it right to the basket. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
The,
because you know what? Even the Haliburton turnovers at the 2.5 minute mark where everybody's freaking out. I'm like, hey guys, relax.
yeah.
Pacers came all the way back and retook the lead. I mean,
Yep.
they were back in front. You're like, okay, they survived it. And then yeah, to have that kind of, it was almost like the Knicks came back and won the game twice tonight. And
Mhm.
that stings worst of all.
Well, we'll see what happens in game two. I think it's going to be interesting. Reggie Miller will be on the call for
Mhm.
TNT. Does he inject some life into the Pacers, into Tyrese Haliburton? Do they have a conversation? Does Tyrese go Reggie Miller on us and have a 25 point, fourth quarter, something crazy like that? I think were you the one tweeting about that? That you said the 25-point fourth quarter was
Yeah.
more impressive than 8
It-
points 9 seconds.
yes.
I agree with you.
Yeah. It was the 8 points 9 seconds was almost kind of like a when you catch a Hail Mary. You know what I mean? It's unbelievable, and you're like in shock that it happened. The 25-point fourth quarter, and I can tell you this from growing up, given my allegiances of watching that game. Like once the Knicks got past the Bulls, it was a guarantee. Like the Pacers, what? They're not going to lose to the Pacers. It was like having your skin peeled off in the fourth quarter. That's what it felt like. Like every shot that Reggie made, it was just an absolute dagger. And to this day, and I understand the game is a lot different offensively now than it was then, but to this day, especially given the context of the era, it's truly one of the great individual performances in league history, and I'll always feel that way about it. I mean, it was an otherworldly type performance from Reggie. It was incredible.
Mm-hmm. It was incredible. I mean, and I love him going back with Spike Lee in that moment
Oh yeah,
too. So it'll be more electric, I think, in the Garden more than it was in Game One, which is hard to beat, right? I mean, the fans were great there tonight. The atmosphere was awesome. My wife was watching the game with me, and she was like, "Man, they're a fun fan base." I said, "Yeah, I can't imagine what they're saying to the Pacers bench right now, but I'm sure it's not great." But and then you go and one thing I didn't even talk about either, which was the very beginning of the game when there was a shot clock violation. It looked like Tyrese Haliburton got the shot off on the offensive
yeah.
rebound and made it. But what happened is they actually reviewed that play and they said that he did not establish himself in bounds when he caught the ball. So they ruled it out of bounds, and that's why it was not considered a made basket, which there's another 2 points right there
Yeah.
in a 4 point game that could have swung something. So,
How about the Turner went for a poster dunk third quarter maybe,
yeah, on
missed
Hartenstein.
it. Knicks turned it into a fast break on their end, and there's a 4 point swing. It's just playoff basketball, right? Like sometimes, as much as we talk about like analysis and we dig into everything, sometimes it's just luck, and sometimes just it doesn't bounce your way or whatever. And I think the Pacers had some things just kind of not go their way tonight for sure.
Yeah, yeah. The 4 point play that I'm thinking about too is the Hartenstein, or not Hartenstein, but the Hart made basket, and I think they were down by 5. He made the basket, got fouled, missed the free throw, got the offensive rebound, made the
That's right.
next
Yeah.
two. Another big 4 point swing. So,
Yep.
yeah, it's just little things like that. The Knicks were able to, it felt like the Knicks got a lot of 50-50 balls in this game. So,
Which is what
those
they do, right? I mean,
what they do.
that's why they're where they are.
And it felt like in the Pacers Bucks series that whoever won the 50-50 balls won the game. So, I thought Indiana, like you said, did a good job in the first half. Second half, it felt like they took their foot off the gas a little bit in terms of like the concentration. And as the game gets tighter, I'm sure it's easier to do. It's easy to sit here on your couch and be like, what are they doing? But
Sure.
in a game, it's just totally different. But Derek, we've talked about this game quite a bit already, and it's a bummer. I'm sure Pacer Nation is just devastated right now. A lot of them are very upset at the officials. If you look at social media, I did tweet about Tyler Ford, number 39 for the officiating crew. It feels like every single time that he is refereeing a Pacers game, it never goes their way, or he just makes some very, very terrible calls, and they might still
Little
win the
Birdie
game.
told me he's a Ball State grad.
Yes, I guess needs to go back
Okay.
to Ball State.
I did not know that until like an hour ago.
Yeah,
Um,
JMV was tweeting about that too.
okay, interesting. Yeah, I did not know that. Buddy of mine texted me, said he's a
It's
Ball
like
State grad. I was like, oh, okay.
he must feel like he has to like call stuff on Indiana so he's not viewed as a homer.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
Can we just like
That's
conflict of interest, like him not refereeing more of the Pacer games? Because
I don't
I'd
know.
rather take Tony Brothers over him 10 out of 10 times. Like I like Tony Brothers as a ref. I don't think he's no nonsense, but man, Tyler Ford like it. I'm not the only one that feels this way. There's a lot of people that feel this way. I know the record with him refereeing Knicks games versus Pacer games has been more in favor of the Pacers, but like it doesn't mean that he makes terrible calls and the Pacers still just win in spite of him being on the floor. But like he was the one that was making all these really
Yeah.
questionable calls. Like jumps in there to be like, oh yeah, that was off the Knicks when it was off Nimhard's foot there at the end of the game. I'm like, you didn't even see it. How do you make that call?
Yeah, I don't believe in official conspiracies. I just believe that sometimes they're just bad at their jobs, just like we're all human, right? And
Yep,
I think they just missed some stuff tonight, and it seemed to be especially clustered around the final 2.5 minutes of the game, which is really unfortunate when everybody's watching locked in.
for sure. And I will say this, like, there's been a lot of crap going on with Major League Baseball right now with their home plate
Oh
umpires and the
God,
calls they've been
yeah,
calling.
awful.
I mean, it's just not a good time to be an official. It's
No,
just, and honestly, I think it's just going to get harder and harder because there's so many cameras, so many replays. You're
yep,
viewed under such a small microscope. Like everyone sees what you're doing wrong. It's difficult. It's hard to be perfect. And you're right. It's human error. It's what I love. But I would hate for robots to be out there officiating games. You know, you like the human element of a referee, right? You don't want them to be robots. But man, it just the lack of inconsistency in all major sports, really, for penalties and fouls and things like that, strike zones. It's just, it could be a lot better.
Yeah, tough job, but sometimes I'm like, you got to be better than this, guys.
Yeah.
Got to be better than this.
All right, I'll quit crying. I'll get off my soapbox. Go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you at, what you got going out for Indiana Business Journal, Query and Schultz, all that fun stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So Corey and Schultz will have a new episode. Well, you're probably going to be listening to this on Tuesday. So tonight at 7:30, where we're talking all about game one, Jay Query and I. And that's every Tuesday, ISC Sports Network and QueryandSchultz.com if you want to check that out. IBJ, I'm not writing this week, but next week. So it'll be Mark Monteith. And I know he's going to write about the Pacers this week for IBJ if you want to see that. And then at Schultz975 is always on Twitter. So where you can find me.
All right. Well, like Derek said earlier in the show, after he comes on this podcast, the Pacers followed up with the playoff win. So game two, let's hope we're back here for a game win recap, and we're tied 1-1, heading back to Indianapolis. But until then, Pacer Nation will be back tomorrow with another episode here, and we're going to preview game two. I don't know who we're going to have on yet, but we will have a guest probably, and it'll be a lot of fun. So thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.